Pedro from A&P-Reacts. I'm here today with Matt and Russ of Necronautical to talk about the upcoming new record, Slain in the Spirit, out August 20th on Candlelight Records. How you guys doing?
I'm doing fine, man. Yeah, doing good.
Great, thank you.
Well, I want to say thank you for taking the time to join me on the channel to talk about this record. I was blown away by the album, but before I start with pumping your tires about this record, because I really enjoy this album. Like, you guys really have an amazing record on your hands here. Let's start perhaps from the beginning. How did it all get started? How is the creative process, and was it different on this record from previous albums?
Yeah, I suppose almost the kind of global situation kind of forced the process to be a little bit different. We'll get into that later, I suppose. In terms of getting started, I don't know. I don't ever really feel like we sort of like decide, okay, now's the time we're going to write an album. It's just, writing songs is a part of our life now and has been for a long time. So it doesn't really feel like an unusual thing to start throwing ideas around anyway. So we released our last album, Apotheosis, in 2019. And the situation then was we'd finished the album, but we were just finalizing contracts with Candlelight, and so because of that, it just basically took a little bit of time for that record to come out after the point when it was finished. And well, inspiration comes at any time, really. And I just remember having finished that album, just really having a strong urge to get back to writing. In fact, it often sort of comes about that way because, I mean, I guess what people might not realize is that by the time a record is released, like, to the band, the songs may already be fairly old. I mean, we probably got the writing on this one pretty close to completion, maybe about 9 months ago now. This one's been a bit faster. But yeah, certainly by the time we were done recording Apotheosis, it had probably been a year, really, since anything had been written. And so certainly myself and the other guys were quite hungry, at least, just to get back to writing riffs, I think. Because, I mean, it's like when things get so complete and you've done a lot of work on the lyrics and the production and packaging and everything, I kind of just want to just pick up the guitar and just get back to basics, really. And that seems to be the cycle of things. So it tends to be that when something comes out, that kind of makes you feel like, right, okay, great, that's that. And then you almost feel like you want to react to that. And I think the case with Slain was probably in the first instance, we sort of took in the last album, we were able to understand it for what it was once it was completed. And I kind of felt like, we loved the Apotheosis record. We kind of felt like taking a step back and look at it, it was like quite gloomy, atmospheric, a bit more moody kind of album. And I think we all felt quite keen, having done that, to try and make a record that was going to be like full force. And so yeah, I think we were really quite up for doing that. So in terms of like the riff writing, song structures, like a lot of it was done probably tail end of 2019, early 2020, and then pandemic hit us just as we were wrapping up the actual songwriting, and that would have been the time we were starting to look to actually record things. So ever shifting rules made that fairly difficult. We were lucky to get a decent window of studio time and just be able to use, I don't know, Zoom calls, voice notes, guitar tabs, home recording to basically put everything together. So it was a strange situation for us, but I think in a way, like, it's been a really a strange time in life, and to be able to focus energy into a creative project, at least for me, has been fairly therapeutic. I always feel like I'm not really thinking too much about the outside world when I'm doing that. So yeah, I mean, there's no sort of force behind it, really, I guess. It just felt very natural. It's almost surprising that it's come around so quickly to release, but yeah, we're damn happy with it, and the response from those who have heard it seems to be great so far. And yeah, I think we certainly did what we set out to do, creating a nice, energetic album.
So was the pandemic the biggest hurdle for you guys in terms of a new challenge that gets thrown into your lap that obviously wasn't there on previous records, or or was there something else that threw a little bit of a gear in a wrench in that gearbox of yours?
So I think there'd been a lot of the work had already started before the pandemic. I think pretty much all the songs were kind of written. I can remember we were actually already doing a few gigs around Europe, and Russ had brought along like a scratch track CD of all the riffs he'd sort of recorded, and like, oh, this is going to be this kind of song. This is going to be the foundation for this other song. So, you know, we heard sort of 3 or 4 of those songs, you know, incomplete versions, before, you know, whilst we were still touring. So a lot of the writing was done before then, and I think Russ really used the opportunity of being indoors with a bit of time to kind of build the layers on top of what had already been written.
Yeah, I suppose that was probably what I was able to focus on. I mean, we tend to get writing fairly quick after release, simply because like the process of making music of this sort of scope, you know, like having a lot of vocals and well thought out lyrics and these kind of elements, you know. We're aware that takes a long time, so we kind of get started on the bones fairly quickly, because otherwise people might be waiting 4 years for a new album, you know. So that's another sort of impetus. But yeah, everyone in the world had a different experience of the pandemic and lockdowns. Most of us in the band kept working. I had about 2 months stuck in my house, you know, without work. And yeah, I used that time to just really dig deep on the keyboards, because I knew at that point there was definitely no recording anybody else. So I thought, well, what can I do? And it was all about that keyboard work. So really immersed myself in that. And then by the time we got to the summertime, there was sort of like some slight relaxations of the rules in the UK, which enabled me to like have a one-on-one jam with, you know, Rob, our drummer. And yeah, just be able to get Matt or James over individually to lay down some guitar parts. And then actually you know, the last time we'd all been together was the gig we did in Portugal. And the next time we were all together was in the studio to record the album. So somehow we got it done. But it was like, the pandemic certainly didn't inspire it. In fact, I find the whole situation very uninspiring. But yeah, I mean, it complicated things, but also enabled things. So I don't know. I guess maybe it probably would have took a little longer if we were doing shows and stuff like that, you know.
Once you start working on these songs and you have an idea for what the album, even before you hit the studio, you have an idea for what the album is going to sound like. How much importance do you put on the overall design and structure of the album when you're putting that track listing together? Is that an important aspect of what you want the record to sound like as the final product?
100%, yeah. I think we're all believers in the idea that songs kind of bounce off each other. And even albums do. I mean, I mentioned earlier how like one record can kind of inspire the next in terms of where you want to go. I find that happens track to track as well. And sometimes, you know, you might have the song there, but it can take a while to put the sequence together. Matt actually is very good at this. I think he may have done some work on sequencing the songs on this album. I can't quite remember, but he certainly did it on Apotheosis. I think maybe it takes a more objective ear, someone who's a little less close to the, you know, because I might have structured a lot of these songs myself, but there was more bouncing off each other actually this time. Because I remember, for example, Hypnagogia, when I first sort of had demoed that and showed it to the guys, like, I'm really interested in people's like immediate reactions to stuff, because as a songwriter, you can't really get that. And I remember I played it and Matt was like, but just really great at just picking up fundamentals. He just went, no, this song is too long. And that riff, which is that's always the case, right? And yeah, that riff, which is now the last riff in the song, Matt was just like, that needs to be the last riff. And you know, those kind of reactions are important, because that's how it's going to hit other listeners' ears, right? So really, I trusted him in a few instances on that. Actually, because of that, we have some snappier songs, shorter songs on this record, probably. Because of that,
the clock in under 5. That's a PB for us, I think.
Of course, in the beginning, they're all about 16 minutes long, obviously.
And another element of this record that I thought was really interesting is when you look at the lyrical content and you look at the soundscape that the songs have, the two are so well interconnected. And it always makes me wonder, is this like the chicken or the egg? Like, who comes first? Because it's so hard for me to listen to this record and separate the lyrics from the soundscape. It almost feels like the two kind of come to the table exactly at the same time.
I'm really glad you interpret it that way. I'll let Matt lead on this one. It's kind of a little bit of both, a little bit of back and two.
There's a lot of interesting stuff we do there, and obviously Russ writes the majority of the music, and I kind of put the lyrics to that afterwards. But with this album in particular, because we've had kind of so much writing space, you know, the main way we've been kind of in comms with each other has been like over like WhatsApp chats and Zoom calls and stuff like that. It's been a lot more back and forth rather than saying, all right, this is the couple of weekends or the weeks we're going to like do this writing process. We've had like this full 2-year back and forth, you know, and it's just been like voice notes to each other over WhatsApps. You know, I'd wake up, you know, look at my WhatsApp history or something like that, and I just have all these messages from Russ saying like, oh, you ever seen this film, The Ninth Gate? We should write about that, or stuff like that, like little ideas, you know, getting one-liners like Necro-Psychonaut, that should be in there somewhere, and then kind of bouncing off these ideas.
It's a lot of it. Because they're friends, I guess. Like, sorry, Matt. If you know, like for example, just that film. If something comes into your head, like I mean, it doesn't have to be a song or even anything remotely directly to do with the band. It could be a philosophical concept or a book or even a piece of artwork you've seen. And all of this is just sort of feeding what we want to be the vibe. And so we know each other really well. So we throw these things about, and we seem to be able to get this sort of collective vision of what we're doing. And once we have that, that influences everything that goes on, from the structure of the songs to the lyrical content, and then the lyrical content might in turn inspire what's happening with the keyboards. So I'm glad that's the result you get from it, because that's what we intend. But it's quite organic, I think.
Yeah, it comes across that way, at least for me as a listener, it came across that way. That's why it was very hard for me to distinguish between one and the other, because it just feels like it's really one piece coming together. You can't really break the two apart. And I can't talk about this album and the track listing without mentioning that Slayer cover that when I was listening to the album, I'm not going to lie to you guys. Now I kind of figured out whose idea it was based on the Slayer banner that I see on the background. But it wasn't your idea?
Oh, yeah, what's my idea?
Because when I was listening to the album, I was like, oh, you know, I'm going to enjoy the record, but I'm kind of dying to get to that last track just to see what these guys did with this Slayer cover. And my jaw kind of like dropped to the ground. You guys did a phenomenal job with this song. Like, it's perhaps my favorite Slayer cover now of all time. Because I love this song, and I love what you guys did, because you created such a much darker soundscape to it than what the original has. And I feel like it fits the lyrics of the song far better. So how did the idea for this Slayer cover come about?
It was quite a last minute decision, actually. We only decided to do that about 3 weeks before we were going to record. And, you know, actually, I read an interview with a rapper, I forget which rapper. I like to consume a lot of just music shit from everywhere. And this guy was just talking about, you know, his releases and how he approaches releasing on different formats in a modern age. And, you know, he was talking about how he feels like it's a good thing to sort of offer something unique according to different formats. And, you know, so we kind of offer something special with each thing you're doing. So, for example, the Slayer cover will only be found on the CD release, but then, you know, the vinyl, you just get sort of like our original material. And because originally, before we added that cover on, going back to the track listing idea we were talking about earlier, the tracks were designed to fit well together. We knew we were going to do a double vinyl, so we had considered throughout the writing, there's side A, side B, side C, side D. Mm-hmm. And actually, those sides, they're actually continuous pieces of audio. So like Ritual and Occult joined, you know, side A, blah, blah, blah. And so we thought, okay, well, it might be nice to offer something unique for the CD release. So a bonus track was what we decided for. And yeah, we're all Slayer fans. And that song in particular, I think, I mean, it's not like, it's kind of a latter-day Slayer classic. I wouldn't describe it as like a classic Slayer song. And I hadn't really thought about this, but I showed it to my friend Cheyenne, who plays in a band called Trivax, and he said it was quite ballsy to do that. And I was like, oh, why do you say that? He said, well, because that's Slayer's new metal era. And he said, you put synth on it. He said, you know, a lot of people could really turn their noses up about that. I said, I hadn't really thought about that. But I said, I guess you're right. But then he said, but but it's great. And well, we're glad about that. So we're pleased with it. And you know, a lot of people were probably more likely to go with songs like Angel of Death or South of Heaven or something more from the 80s era, I guess, like the real classic albums. But I think the reason we selected that song is because, well, we were all born late 80s, and so the God Hates Us All album sort of came out when we were about 13 years old, just the right age to be getting into heavy stuff, you know. So Disciple really was our Slayer song. That was the song that brought us in. So
that's your generational song.
Yeah. Exactly, man. And from that release of that album, you know, then we're going back, we're checking out South of Heaven, we're checking out Show No Mercy.
Yeah.
These kind of things. So yeah, that song is our generation's Slayer classic, so we chose that one. And also I like the way, you know, the album's called Slain and it's Slayer, just little things. And yeah, just that strong God Hates Us All line, and I don't know, it kind of just like gets this nice hard punch at the end of the album, which you know, maybe Slayer could provide better than we could. So
I think you guys did a really good job with it, because it is a cover, but it fits really nicely with the overall soundscape that the record has up until that point. So it's kind of works two ways. It works as a really cool cover, but at the same time, it doesn't really feel separated from all the work that you guys put onto the record up until that point. So I personally, I love it. It's just such a well done cover. I just really enjoy it. And you mentioned the synths on this record. You guys move your sound a little bit more to the symphonic side, which I think just opens up such a nice palette of sound and palette of options as far as what you can do with soundscapes, with the overall footprint of the record. Is that the natural evolution you see for the band?
I mean, to be honest, we've always done it quite a lot. Like our second album, The Endurance at Night, was heavily symphonic. In fact, I'd maybe even say more so. But I think maybe what makes this one feel a little different is the way that we've written riffs is a lot more jagged, a lot more like fast finger moving stuff. And so, you know, changing that necessitated approaching the synth in a different way, because I guess in Joint's album, we might be talking about some more like drawn out kind of chords. And so the keys might feel a little more ambient or floaty and a little more background, whereas this kind of riffing, like harder approach to riffing, necessitates a more detailed kind of orchestration with a lot more stabs. And going back to integrating with lyrical themes, we delved into like some occult stuff here, and some kind of psychedelic ideas, and this kind of thinking. So we started like trying to like throw in some sounds from like, you know, like giving nods to kind of late 70s kind of progressive rock stuff like Hammond organs and these kinds of things. It almost that's like a sense of fun to it, I think. But yeah, it's not really a conscious decision, but I think yeah, we aim to make something, like I said, a little more complex and a little more brutal, and so changing the nature of the foundation, I guess, affects the way that we were going to approach those elements.
Some of the stuff we've done in terms of like the lyrics as well with that one is you've got a lot of kind of like character voices and stuff coming through as well. So we've got three different vocalists basically performing on that record between Russ, myself, and Victoria. So being able to write like different kinds of sounds for those people to actually sing to, really, I think, kind of lift, particularly the symphonic elements where you've got the more kind of operatic style vocals going on. It really kind of lifts those into different sounds, like different prominence across the record. So it picks out those symphonic elements more rather than them being more of a backing feature. You know, you've got that symphonic element being like a lead melody, particularly in like, you know, Hypnagogia and Ritual.
It almost pushes some of the tracks more into a cinematic or theatrical approach, which then ties extremely well with the lyrical content. So you're not just listening to a song, it just allows the listener to visualize what the song represents. And I think that's really the beauty of this record, and perhaps one of the strengths of the album. And that's one of the things I want to ask you guys. I couldn't narrow it down the record as having one thing that I could say this is the strength of the album. I felt really the album's strength was the collective of all the pieces coming together in almost a flawless kind of way. What do you guys see as being the strength of this album?
Well, those are very big compliments. So thank you for saying that. It's nice to hear that. Strength of this album, I feel like as time progresses, we just learn to be better at being necronautical. I like your analogy of it being cinematic as well. I think that's kind of, since day one, been the motivation. It's never, the idea behind doing, like, I guess, symphonic extreme metal, even though we're aware like bands like that already exist that we like, I think really what motivated us to take that approach in the first place was that it's fun. Like, when I first got my recording setup, I guess, like, Matt and James are my best friends, so when they came out, like, look, you can do this. You can record a guitar and you can put a string on it. And I was like, whoa. And suddenly, like, the potential of what you can do starts to unravel, and that remains to be, very exciting. And we are big fans of film. James works in film for his career, and actually he directs our music videos as well. And so actually, I feel like the use of keys was kind of intended to come across the same way that they are used in score, like to add like sort of emotional twinge, or like to put your mind in a certain setting. I mean, it's not just like keyboard sounds we're using, like sometimes we're using like, the sound of winds or thunder or drums or something. It's all meant to, give it this cinematic thing. I think the strength of the album is that we've been able to just create a lot of different soundscapes and just use them to fundamentally express the emotions we were trying to express. And we want this to be like kind of descent into madness. So that's why you're hearing a lot of atmospheres kind of shifting. It's supposed to be like a crazy journey, from harsh extremes to like ambience to all sorts. So I guess the strength of the album is, or what I believe to be the good achievement about it, is you've really got everything in the kitchen sink in there, but I think it successfully conveys the idea we wanted to put across, and nothing was done for the sake of it,
Yeah, I think just having someone like yourself say, you think it is this cohesive piece, that's the strength of the album for me. And it's early days with the release at the moment, but I think that the fact that everyone we spoke to about the album seems to get it so far, they see that artistic intent. It's not just a bunch of stuff that sounds good. Hopefully it is that as well, but we've got this real meaning behind it, and this real underlying idea of creating this fun extreme sound that is also has a lot of merit to it.
One last question for you guys, and that is, what do you feel? Because I feel like with every record, you get a snapshot of where the band is at that specific time. It's kind of hard to stay stagnant as you move across a career and different records. But with this album, with everything that's gone into it, as you start, you're not walking away from it because the album release is still ahead of you. But as you take a step back and you take a look at the record, what do you feel like you take away from this album? Well, what was those learning experience? What was something that you're going to take with you towards the next album from this record?
I feel like you're right. Records, especially the more of them that we make, you start to associate them with periods in your life, and you might not even realize it at the time, but probably like a lot of what's going on in your life, like it might influence the music, or simply listening to the music might just remind you of that because that was going on. And for me, at least, as I listened to this, this was really, I think, the time when we truly learned to work together. We always work together, but like to properly understand each other, to properly understand what everybody wants to bring to the project, to play to everybody's strengths. And that's what I really enjoy about the album, is that, you really hear, the creativity in Rob's drumming, Matt adding loads and loads of cool ideas for his bass guitar playing. He really did a very complete lyrical work with lots of different narratives and very creative ideas. James getting to do like a ton of his shred lead guitar, and contributing like you did the acoustic piece on Necronautical, like loads of just cool little ideas. So I listened to it and I can hear everyone's contribution. You know, there's no one really leading this one, and that's what I really like. And it kind of, considering the difficulties the virus imposed upon us, and sort of like, you know, our growth together as a band, like this album just feels very triumphant for me, because it just it shows me that the strength of this band as a collective. It reminds me of the strength of our friendship, and it feels triumphant because we really like made this against the odds. And like, you know, even days before entering the studio, like it's just like so close to the line all the time. Is this going to happen? Are things going to change? It just feels really satisfying that it all worked, that we didn't give up on it, you know, and it worked. So I have fun feelings about it. Yeah.
There was a fantastic sort of like 2-week weird period in like UK law where the creative arts were in this grey area where it's like, oh, recording studios are open, but you've got to be 4 people that already have worked together and weird stuff like that. And it's like, that's us, right? We can go and do this. And this sort of like long weekend we had in the studio in Wales with Chris, our producer, was just this absolute spiritual tonic after having been like locked inside for 12 months. And it was so nice just to come together, the 4 of us and Vicky as well doing the vocals. It was just this fantastic experience, and we could already start to feel that. I think the word Russ has used there is triumphant, and I absolutely love that word. Is it really does feel like this. It's kind of like making that struggle worthwhile. You know, it was a difficult year for a lot of people. You know, and it's really nice to kind of come out of a difficult period with something that we're really, really proud about.
Yeah, and like we were saying, you know, as you look back at it from the future, you're always going to listen to those songs and take you back to that specific time and place that brought those creative juices into making this album happen. At least that's how music works with me. So I'm sure it's the same with you guys. Well, Russ, Matt, thank you very much for your time today, man. It was an absolute pleasure to chat with you guys. Congratulations on an incredible sounding record and my favorite Slayer cover. Really, like I just absolutely love this song. It's killer. I love what you guys did with it. I love what you guys did with the record. You deserve all the praise. Really, it's a phenomenal album.
Thank you so much, man. You've made my day.
my pleasure. Take care, guys.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Pedro.